I'm Charlie.
I'm Ellie.
And I'm Zofia.
And this is our presentation, Biases are Looking to Incarceration.
From the Library of Congress, the Sixth Amendment reads, in all criminal prosecutions, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of the state. America has swayed from this, using minorities as scapegoats and creating unethical stereotypes within the public.
We want to talk a little bit more about how the U.S. is driving some of the highest incarceration rates in the world. As you can see from this graph here, our incarceration rates are rapidly moving upwards, and they are more akin to wartime countries than developed countries like the U.S. Usually, when countries reach a certain level of development, their incarceration rates plummet way down, but that has not happened in the U.S., which shows something that is clearly wrong. High incarceration, like this, means a chain reaction and a breeding ground for more incarceration and more issues like drug use and aggression. As you can see from this graph here, by the Prison Policy Initiative, there are clear disparities that are caused by a history of stereotyping and profiling done by law professionals. Higher rates of ethnic and racial minorities are incarcerated than in the population, also leading to longer sentences, harsher parole rates, and worse treatment in incarceration. As you can see, the Black population in the U.S. is 14%, but makes up 42% of the prison population.
So with this, our main focus area is how can America remedy effects of sentencing biases within the U.S. judicial system?
The perspectives that we're going to look about are law professionals, psychologists, and incarcerated individuals and their families.
Law professionals, because prosecutors are rewarded for high sentencing rates and are often not punished for unethical violations. Bias and prejudice can go unchecked, even unknowingly, as often people have unconscious or implicit biases that affect people's everyday lives when they get sentenced.
Psychologists, because they can look into how everybody has bias and how bias works, and they can also look into how incarceration can affect people's mental health.
And for incarcerated individuals and their families, we look about how the bias affects them personally, along with their families. The stereotypes that the prosecutors have, which are unconscious or conscious, makes them feel as though they are targets and invoke fear within. The lenses that we're touching base on are social and ethical. The prosecutor's bias, whether it's unconscious or conscious, and these impartial juries that are being used on these court cases, affects minorities' lives, making them feel as though they are prey, easy arrest, and creates a stigma within the general public.
We use scientific because when somebody is incarcerated, their mental health and physical health plummet, as 85% of incarcerated individuals do not receive the health care they deserve. And exonerees who were in jail don't receive or have to relearn basic needs and also develop serious mental health issues after being incarcerated.
And economic, because people in poverty or that have lower incomes are often targeted and profiled. And jail traps people in poverty, continuing the cycle as people often cannot get work or have job instabilities after being released from jail. This hurts the overall economy of the United States as well. So we would like to talk about our main solution, which is having mandatory bias training in law professionals and increased representation in trials through more diverse juries and judges.
This is Sam Summers, who's a psychologist professor at Tufts University. He does work in racism, racial equality, and group diversity. He says a jury's mental composition can influence its decision-making processes and its final decision, meaning that when there's more representation in a courtroom, that means there's a more likely chance that there'll be a little bias.
And then bias training, which is we propose should be a workforce requirement for law officials. Bias training works to acknowledge that everyone has implicit or unconscious biases, illustrate how biases will manifest in the workplace, and describe how biases will affect people in their daily lives after outcomes of sentencing. And the goal, or our solution we propose, is to reduce biases and stop the problem at its root. As you can see from this graph here by Claire Thompson, who's a university professor and a psychologist, you can see the clear effect of bias training on awareness, understanding.
Some limitations and implications of bias training include there needs to be some more research done, which we have graphs like what was on the previous slide about how their understanding increases, but that doesn't get rid of the bias at the root. We need to address existing bias, whether it's in culture or religion or whatever household beliefs prosecutors have. There needs to be some de-escalation training, an inavailability thought process, which is knowing that you will always have a little bit of bias and not wanting to change that, thinking, oh, if I have bias, why should I work on changing it? You need to want the change to happen for this issue to be resolved.
So with those limitations, our first alternative solution is utilize incarceration alternative. This is things like probation, community service, and rehab. Some positive thing about alternative to incarceration is it limits negative effects of incarceration. Like I spoke before about how people develop really bad mental health issues and physical health issues. It also lowers our incarceration rates, as the U.S. has the highest incarceration rates around the world, and these are more personalized towards the person or the crime. This is Karma Williams. When she was in her teenage years, she was diagnosed with alopecia. This led to her peers making fun of her, so she fought back. She was supposed to be incarcerated, but Philadelphia's youth justice system had an alternative to incarceration program, which led her to become the woman today, and she says without this, she wouldn't have the opportunities that she has today. Although this is a good solution, some limitations of this is it puts the decision on one person. So this leaves room for more bias. It's also hard to mediate and enforce, and it doesn't work for all the crimes that are committed.
Our next alternative is to create regulations for minimum and maximum sentences, whether that be first or repeat offenders. The positives of this includes reduced time in prison, especially if that's a false accusation, leading into our second, that's less time people spend in prison, which is less physical and mental issues within. Like Charlie mentioned earlier with their scientific perspective, that physicals are like arthritis, rashes, malnutrition, and mental as in anxiety or depression. Other countries have been doing this, as in Canada, and they've had amazing results within, which could be a limitation of our main solution. Some limitations and implications of our alternate is it's lowly effective, which is one of the main reasons why we didn't pick this for our main solution. We also don't know who would enforce this, which, like our first alternative, it could be more bias on one person. And it's just a general idea. It's hard to implement upon a large scale.
Alright, we would like to return to our main solution, which is having bias training be more mandatory and increasing representation in trials through more juries being representative of whoever's being accused of which crime, things like that. We chose this because there's no like deciding person. Unlike with the other ones that would still have a judge sentencing people, this like reduces that and has one congruent kind of curriculum to have all officers follow that can be backed by science. So that has an effect more widespread change across the U.S. and it is already super attainable because this is the leading way to combat bias right now, but it's not super widespread because people don't know a lot about it and people don't implement it on their areas because people need to want the change. And so it's already the leading way to combat bias with lots of researchers backing this, which is why we chose it as our main solution. But at the end of the day, U.S. is facing a huge issue. This is a crisis in the U.S., and all of our proposed solutions would spread awareness and help. We chose ours because it's the most effective and attainable. But America is facing an issue that affects everyone, from the economy to families of victims, and it is growing by the day. So people need to look at their role in bias to make a more liberal and free United States. Oh, sorry guys. We were excited. We have 3 actually.
Okay. Charlie.
Yeah.
Reflecting on your colleagues' work, which one had the greatest impact on your overall understanding of the problem that your group identified?
I would say Sophia had the greatest impact on like the problem identified because she just like made it so much easier to understand, and she also provided a lot of graphs and like real life stories like the Karma Williams story to more understand the problem better and to understand like why this needs to become like a thing and why the solution needs to like happen. And she just like provided a lot of information and like a lot of like background knowledge too.
Ellie, describe how the content of your team presentation was changed as a result of the group discussions.
Finding an actual solution that both benefited people and it was easy to implement was our hardest part. And we talked about it a lot. We went through many alternates. We had, I think, 5 alternates that we had to narrow down just because we didn't know exactly what to do to mostly benefit people but also make it easy to implement. And then we landed on bias training and more representation because that was the easiest.
Okay, thanks. Okay, Sophia. improve your ability to work with a group as a result of this project?
I think in general, when we started this group, we kind of had a lot of dates planned and like very set schedules on when we would get certain things done, who would do what, and I think ended up having a lot of discussion instead. We met up once at Smiley, and instead of working, we just discussed like what we genuinely thought of our project, and I think that like made me a really flexible, like more of a flexible person in a group, and learned that like teamwork is more about like understanding that we are all like super busy people with different lives, but we gave each other like a lot of grace, and we all like it worked out really well for us.
Thanks.